Hi, I'm Matt Hugg with Nonprofit.Courses, and I'm here today with Priscilla Rosenwald of Leadership Recruiters. And Priscilla, thank you so much for joining us today and talking about the essence of an effective board.
Thanks, Matt. It is totally an honor, and it's one of my very favorite topics in the world. The reason I think it's so important is I have never met a solid organization that didn't have a solid, effective board,
Hmm.
and they really go hand in hand. I almost feel like you need a strong board to have a strong organization, not the other way around.
Well, exactly. No, that makes a lot of sense. So tell me a little bit about Leadership Recruiters.
So my firm for the last 20 years has been doing executive recruiting and leadership coaching.
Okay.
The executive recruitment piece has really focused a lot on board engagement
Okay.
and board leadership and how to do leadership development with both board staff and professional staff and how to manage leadership change.
Okay, sounds good. So people have a good idea of the context at which you bring to this program, which, I mean, all the experience that you have is really respected in the industry, which is why you're.
So, we're talking about boards. And what's most important about boards is how you do your board recruitment, how you do your board development, and then how you engage your board members once they're in place.
Mm.
So it's really necessary to have people understand what their role is on the board so everybody has clear expectations. And it's also important to know that there is a difference between board governance and the operations of the nonprofit.
Oh, that's huge, right?
Yeah.
I mean, because there's so many boards who say, well, either they just people can't resist. I'm a board member, so I'm your boss. I need to tell you how to do
Or I
it.
don't like how you're doing that. So let me just come in and tell you how to do
Right.
that.
Or in my business, we do it this way.
So many years ago, before I started doing this work, I was consulting to an organization and the executive director. So it was an organization that was named after someone that was deceased. And I'm telling you that because the friends and family of the deceased person were all the board members of this charity.
Ah, wow.
Important. So they all felt that they had a vested interest in the organization. And the executive director was so beleaguered. And I said, why is this job so hard? She said, because everybody in the board calls me to tell me how I should be doing my job.
Mm.
And I thought, no, that's not good. That doesn't work.
Yeah, she ended up with, I don't know, 10 bosses instead of the board chair
Correct.
as one boss.
Correct. That is exactly the point. So the board chair is the buffer. Unless it's prearranged that someone on the board has contact with a staff person,
Mhm.
whether it's project related or anything specific.
Well, fundraising is a good example where, somebody head of the fundraising committee
Absolutely.
should have engagement with the development officer.
Yeah, or it could be a marketing committee, it could be a program. So it's prearranged communication. Otherwise, all communication goes through the board chair.
Yeah.
And the board chair and the chief executive have a very close, very active, very transparent relationship.
Yep.
That way nothing falls through the cracks. So the board is not overstepping their role in operations, and the board chair understands what strong governance looks like. So everybody on the board, everybody, whether you have 10 people on the board or heaven forbid 30 people on the board, knows what their role is and what's expected of them. I want to just say that I'm a very big fan, and Matt will support me on this, of having smaller boards. I think a good board is about 12 to 15 people.
Yeah.
It is not made up of your bigger donors.
Mhm.
You want your bigger donors on a special committee. You want to honor them. You want to bring them in, but you don't want them making decisions for the organization, because if they don't like the decisions you make, they take their friends and they leave.
Well, and that speaks to for the role of an advisory group who isn't necessarily a fiduciary board member. These are people who are your close friends, your good donors, who probably don't want to show up to board meetings all the time anyhow.
Oh, yeah, so they're thrilled to have that kind of role, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But you can honor them, and a lot of times they feel honored, and they might even put it on their resume that they are advisors to you, to the executive staff or board members.
And I would give that committee a very fancy name.
Yeah,
And then people feel like they are contributing
right,
and they make a difference, and you don't have to beg them to come to board meetings.
right, right. As a board, it can be a lot of responsibility, a lot of time, and getting the most dedicated people for that who really love your mission is important to do.
So let's talk about roles a little bit. What I I think the executive committee is very critical of a board, as well as I believe that the executive leadership team is critical to the running of a nonprofit. So I'm a very big fan of having the chief executive be the face of the organization and the outside person, and if possible, have one, maybe two people who are in operation roles responsible for the internal workings of the nonprofit. I think a model like that on the board works well also, so that the board chair
Mhm.
is responsible for working hand in hand with the chief executive and being the face of the board, being the outside person. They may be the biggest donor. They may, excuse me, donor cultivator.
Well, it could be the biggest
Donor,
donor, but
yeah,
they also might, I mean, they have to know their role in cultivation.
right.
Yeah.
And then what I've seen work well is the vice chair is responsible for governance on the board.
Hmm.
So it frees up the board chair for managing the outside and the inside.
Yeah.
Every board needs a governance committee. The governance committee can can do nominations, they can do the onboarding, maybe an offshoot of that is the strategic planning committee, but definitely a governance committee.
Well, and a lot of people are surprised to hear that that governance committee, whether it's the committee on the committee or the nominating committee, some folks would, although I think that only speaks to part of what they are doing, is really the most influential committee on the board, particularly in the long term, because they will find people and get people engaged and recruited and evaluated. We can't forget that role
Oh,
of
thanks.
this
Yes.
group, right? Evaluate the board,
Right.
the board members individually, so that strategically the organization is sustainable over the long term.
Right. So the governance committee is really the mainstay for board leadership
Yeah.
because they're recruiting, they're orienting, they're evaluating board leadership.
Now, something else you said that kind of flashed a mental image in my mind was I see the board and the organization as two pyramids that are stacked that meet at the point of each pyramid, stacked on one above the other, so that it's almost like an hourglass kind of shape, where that point, that intersection, is where the executive director and the board chair are.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, yeah. And so each of them has their responsibility that flows down to their respective parts, but that nexus is essential to the operation of the organization.
I like that.
Yeah.
So every board needs a brief but annual board development day, half day, however you work it, because it's important for people to be reminded of what their roles are.
Mhm.
It's important for people to be re-engaged, and it's important to have a way to integrate new board members.
Yeah.
So board development, preferably done by an outside consultant, not by the board itself,
Mhm.
not by a staff person. And you can make it a social event. It's a way for people to see each other, know that they like each other. If they like each other, they want to work together.
Yeah.
They want to come to board meetings. If they don't know each other, they're not engaged, you're not going to have a dynamic board.
No, that's an excellent point. Have people connect with each other beyond just at a formal board meeting where they're looking across the table and might see somebody who opposes them for an idea, as opposed to being able to pick up the phone and call them and say, hey, Fred, hey, Jane, what's going on? Yeah.
So the board's responsible for governance, which is policy, strategy, everything that has to do with big picture sustainability. The board is not responsible for hiring decisions. The board is not responsible for how the items on the budget are being managed.
Now, it's not to say that they, particularly in hiring decisions, that there are a lot of instances, well, maybe not a lot, but some key instances where you want to have their engagement, executive director being the one that comes to mind, but it's not their ultimate responsibility.
Correct.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so you have committees, you have to have a limited number of viable committees. So a finance committee, a marketing committee, membership, you could have a separate committee for membership if you want, separate from governance. And Matt feels strongly that every board needs a fundraising committee.
This is true. You really do need to have people so there's kind of two sides of that sword. So on one side, people will say, oh, well, now that we have this committee to do fundraising, I don't have to do fundraising myself, right? If there are other board members who aren't on the fundraising committee, which is, in my opinion, exactly wrong. Those are the fundraising committee is the group that moves the process forward in terms of board engagement, and not the people to which the others abdicate their fundraising responsibilities.
And you mentioned something before. So from your perspective, every fundraising committee should also have staff
Yes.
participating on it.
Right. Yeah. That you have that relationship, just like in the finance committee, you would have the CFO as engaged with that. In the fundraising committee, you're going to have at least the chief development officer engaged with that group, so that it's a coordinated effort. In two ways. First of all, the staff person does just that. They staff the committee. They do the things that on the off hours that the committee may not have a chance to do or want to do, but also they're there as a resource to guide them and to make sure that this group of people and the whole board is moving forward on the initiatives that are most important for them to deal with.
And that brings me to another important point, and that's because I'm always surprised when I learn organizations say the executive director attends every committee meeting.
Yeah.
Or the board president attends every committee meeting. You don't need the executive director on every committee. I think the most important committee for the executive director to be on is the committee that's making recommendations for board members, because they have a lot of contacts out in the world and they should be part of the governance committee. If there's another committee you feel it's critical for them to be on, that's fine. Finance, there should be a staff person who's responsible for finance. Again, if you can staff all the committees with a staff member as well as a board member, no board member is chairing more than one committee.
Yep.
And the board chair really needs to show up at the executive committee, and the committee chairs come together to be part of a committee, a larger committee. And that way everybody's communicating, and the board chair doesn't have to be actively in every committee. You'll never get anybody willing to be the board chair if they think they have to go to every committee meeting.
Well, and the other thing too is that when they do attend these meetings, it's special. There's something going on
Nice, Matt.
that is really important for the board chair or the executive director to attend, as opposed to just another day there, and that oh, you're always here kind of thing. Makes a big difference. This is why Franklin Roosevelt said he wasn't going to give fireside chats every week because he wanted them to be special. He wanted people to pay attention to them.
And I hear organizations say all the time, so we're talking about leadership succession on the board level. Well, it's hard to get anybody to want to step up and be the board chair. Well, often that has to be because the role is not defined in a way that somebody can be successful at that and still have a life.
Yeah.
The board chair should not be their life, and it is someone's life. We have a problem.
True.
I really mean that. I don't care if somebody is retired. I love the fact that they want to be engaged, but they shouldn't be going to every committee meeting. They shouldn't be involved in everything that's going on.
So now, how about the goals and vision? Where, when you say you're engaging them in the goals and vision, what do you mean by that?
So there should be a dynamic strategic plan that the organization redoes I would say every 3 years, and revisits it on a regular basis. So there's a guiding direction for the organization, and then the aspects of the strategic plan that are relevant for each of these committees. They should know about that. It should be a document that the staff know about and visit. It's not a document that some wonderful consultant comes in and it's like, done, great, we put it away and we'll look at it again. It should be a living, breathing guide for everybody.
Well, so I could imagine, at least on the salient points to a particular committee, that maybe they make up some little foam core uh, little mini poster and have it at every committee meeting,
Yeah,
and with a desktop easel where it sits there and people can look at it and say, "Are we doing this?"
every committee needs goals,
Yeah.
very clear goals, and they should be revisiting those goals and be clear on how they're accomplishing their goals.
Yeah.
So there's a real sense of why people are coming together. The easiest way to lose people is they aren't engaged with specific responsibilities. So
Mhm.
it's like, well,
I
I
had
don't
a,
understand. I've been to this meeting 3 times and we talk about the same thing every time I come. Why am I here?
well, I had a boss years ago say, we don't burn out volunteers, we rust them out. And it's true. People don't feel engaged. They get rusted out and they just don't want to be
So
that
people
anymore.
need to feel engaged and they need to feel valued. I want to make one other point about committees and some organizations operate this way, some don't. On the committees where outside expertise is valuable, it's worth bringing outside people on the committee besides just having board
Mm,
members, like a marketing committee. You might even want some outside people on a finance committee. Think of the committees because you're growing board leadership and you're growing friends by doing that. So if people
yeah.
are engaged in the organization, they're not coming to the board meetings, they're not directly responsible for governance, but they're part of how you operate. So you're making friends at the same time that you're getting lots of different
Well,
expertise.
and that really, and another part of that too that's important is that it's impossible for your board to have absolutely every kind of skill you need all the time.
Mhm.
And so by bringing these people in on an ad hoc basis, or even to be part of a committee where their expertise is needed, it gives, like you say, an opportunity to evaluate them, and maybe they will move into a board role. But there's it really broadens your base
Right.
and helps you out that way.
Yeah. You want to have, remember, if you have expertise from the outside on a marketing committee or another project, you're not paying for that expertise and you're engaging somebody in the organization.
Right.
I don't mean that you give them a task and they're not creating your marketing plan for you, but they're suggesting strategy, they're suggesting ideas, they're keeping you current. So you have all to gain and nothing to lose by having outside people on committees.